So no Viper videos today. I picked up this pressure washer on the side of the street. One of my neighbors had it sitting out front and I couldn't pass it by. It's a Honda 5 horsepower XR2600. This puts out 2600 PSI. When I picked it up, it had the manual with the free sign written on it, and it said that it runs fine, the hose is fine, it had a flat tire. I just had some kayak cart tires that I had laying around, so I threw those on. He said it wouldn't stay running was the problem. So right then and there, I'm pretty focused on the carburetor. These things don't get run all the time, so if you let them sit, that fuel is just going to sit in the carburetor and gel up. So I figure I'll just clean it out, and that should be the end of it. So the first thing we want to do is pull off the carburetor. 2 screws right here, 1, 2, and that pulls off the air box. What that does is it takes this whole cluster off, so snap this out of there. Take these bolts all the way out so that gasket can fall. Get the spring out of there. Here's the carb. Pop the float bowl off. So there's fuel in there, that's good. That means that the fuel pump is working. The needle is working because it's not overflowing, but it is getting fuel. So we're good there. I think the problem is these carburetors, they're all similar. So this carburetor works the same way that the carburetor does in my 54 Chevy, in my CJ, on my CB750. They all basically work the same, and typically when they stop working, it's because you let them sit and the pilot jet gets clogged. It's a very fine hole. So this one's a little bit different. So this pin will take off. That removes the float bowl, and there's the needle there. Don't want to lose that. It does just come off. So in here is that's your main jet. For this carburetor, the pilot jet is actually in here. I don't know if they actually call it the pilot jet. I think they do. So the way that it works is fuel comes into this area here, and then it goes, there's a vacuum that pulls it in through here. So you see this check ball here. There's a small little hole on the inside of here just past the main, and that's actually what keeps it from bogging down. I don't know if they call it a pilot circuit. This carburetor is just a little bit different. It's not like a motorcycle or a vehicle where you actually accelerate and decelerate, and then when you're off of it, the acceleration, it goes back down to pilot. For this carburetor, it pretty much runs at the higher RPMs the whole time. So for this jet, you want to make sure you don't grab a screwdriver that's too small. You don't want it to be too wide to where it's touching the edges, but you don't want it too small where you're either stripping out the brass plug. You don't want it too small where you're stripping out the brass jet. There it is. And this is the emulsion tube that comes out after it. So this is what disperses the fuel once it's in the carburetor. So you see that tiny little hole in there? So if this was clogged, you wouldn't see that hole. So this one's good, and I just cleaned it out, that's how. But if it wasn't good, you would just take a little bit of just a wire strand. This is just a single strand that I'm putting in there. Oh. Make sure you don't use steel. Use something that's softer than the metal. You don't want to bore out the hole any larger than it is. And then for this emulsion tube, you have a total of 12 holes. So there's 3 holes on 4 different sides, and you just want to make sure that those are cleared out. This hole here is fairly large, so it's not going to get clogged up. You do want to run some carburetor cleaner into there as well. One thing you could do is just put your finger on one side of it and run your carburetor cleaner in through there, and it'll clean out those little dispersions through the side. And take your carb cleaner and run it through all the other passages that you find. Make sure it's nice and cleaned out. So I already cleaned it out. I think we're ready to put it back together at this point. So your emulsion tube will go in, so this long end goes in first. And your main jet. Don't torque this down. I'm just lightly seating it. You do not want to torque down any brass jets. I did already take this main out and clean it, but I did not clean the pilot. And the symptom of that is it'll bog down when you pull the trigger. So I got that out. Sure if you can really see in there. Yeah, there you go. But there's a tiny little hole in that little brass orifice in there. The best way to clean it, because if you scrape carburetor cleaner in there, what you should see is it come out of this hole. I can try to do that. It's not going to happen, but what you want to do is you want to take something very fine. I just have some wire here, and just thread it through that orifice. That's really all it takes. So now it should be open. And that's it. Alright, so now we can put the float bowl back in. This needle, it's got that little groove on the end of it that seats right in here, so it'll hang down like that. It goes in this inlet. That's what prevents the fuel from flowing when the float bowl is filled up. It keeps it from overflowing. So you don't want too much fuel or too little. Some float bowls you'll have a little tab there, so where it's adjustable. This one, it's set it and forget it, which is kind of nice, to be honest. So that's it. So now what you have is float bowl. So if it's empty, that will hang down. As soon as it comes back up, that needle gets pushed in and it stops letting fuel into the float bowl. That's the way that works. So now we can put the bottom on. So just keep in mind where you want the drain valve situated. For me, I want it to come out of the front of the engine. So this is the side. Another thing, you don't want to torque anything down super tight, and just shouldn't even be. You really don't want to torque down anything too tight, so I'm barely just going to snug it. Now we'll put this top screw in here. This is for your idle adjustment, so this stop screw will tell your motor where it should start, or where it should be positioned when you first start it. So I know that mine was about 1.5 turns out. You can always adjust this again later on too, but you just want to have a good starting point. So that is essentially going to decide how wide open your throttle is. So if you have this screwed all the way in, it's gonna let a lot of fuel in, which is going to keep your motor revving pretty high. You have it just cracked open when you first start it, that's what you want. Okay. So this is for the choke. This one, please. These bolts actually go all the way through the airbox, through the carburetor, in through the gasket, and then in through the head. So we'll just get them started so it holds everything in place. And we'll get those screws started into the head. This is a lot harder with the camera in your way, by the way. This choke valve. This is your choke lever here. We want this to go. Get that little rubber grommet. Right here. Don't forget to hook up your fuel line. Don't forget this line. Sometimes this this vacuum line will come off. If this comes off, this is what opens up your fuel pump to let fuel in. So you won't actually get fuel into the carburetor, and you'll be wondering why. But just make sure this is connected. It slips off pretty easily. Mine's connected. It basically falls off when you pull the airbox off. Sometimes it can slip out of place. So we'll give it a jump start. I know the float bowl is completely empty right now. We'll give it a couple tugs to see if we can get some going. Can give it a little juice to get going too. Choke on. That's it. She runs perfectly. I don't have the water disconnected here, so you definitely don't want to run your pressure washer for a long period of time without any water. That's what it uses to keep itself cooled off. I didn't even change the spark plug. I will change the oil on it now that I have it running. Get it nice and hot and get an oil change done. But that's pretty much it. These are super low maintenance. You can run this thing forever. I'll have it for a very long time. And this actually, the previous owner that had this had the manual with it, and it had a date of 2003 on it, so this is already almost 20 years old, and to start on first pull like that, it's pretty awesome.